you ever had a dream of something you wanted so badly that you would do anything to achieve it? Would you give up your family, your friends, your future? I have a dream like that, but the cost is more than I'd ever imagined. My name is Mike Hartman, and I will be a professional wrestler.
Probably shortly thereafter, or maybe a little before, I don't remember, it was a little fuzzy back then, 8 years old, but they never made any good wrestling comics. I bought every wrestling comic that ever came out. I would buy them eagerly, and it just wasn't what I wanted. I mean, I don't want to say they were bad, because, sometimes it's licensed stuff, and people are telling you what to draw and whatnot, but I always got the sense that, it was something that people would do when wrestling was hot to cash in on some, make a few bucks or whatever. Oh, we're going to do this. But it never really felt like they were made by wrestling fans. So, at some point it became apparent that nobody was ever going to make the wrestling comic book that I wanted to read. So, I made it myself. I came up with the idea of Headlocked, and I took it to every comic book company that you can think of, summarily turned down by everyone. Somebody from a fairly large publisher straight laughed in my face, and it's fine. And then they went on to eventually try to make their own wrestling comic, which is kind of fun. But, and so I just decided I was going to do it myself. And, I had been a fan of comics forever, but you don't really understand what goes into putting it together until you have to do it. I worked 2 jobs for almost a year to make enough money to pay for my first print run, to pay for art, to buy some convention tables. I started selling my book out of my backpack at wrestling shows. Back at message boards were like a thing. I would be like, hey, I'm going to be in this seat. People would come buy them from me at the shows. And then I started doing Comic-Cons, and we grew it from there. So it's definitely a labor of love. I still, to this day, I work about 70 hours a week. I manage a warehouse, and I'm on the road every weekend, trying to just bring this to the masses. I don't sleep.
Welcome to my world.
But it's been a fun journey, and it's been super rewarding. I've got to collaborate with so many people I grew up watching and admired and respected, and it's been really
kind
cool.
of starts the ball rolling for the Kings. So.
That's all true except for the gentleman part. I guess as far back as I can first remember starting to draw as a kid, probably maybe 4 or 5 years old, and I started drawing as best I can remember superheroes. I was a huge Superman fan. That was the time that the George Reeves Superman TV show was at its height on TV, and all the kids loved Superman and superheroes, and as like I said, that's what I first started drawing, and continued on mainly doing that for the next few years. And at first, probably the first time that I ever thought about, I don't know what age it is that kids start thinking about what they want to do with the rest of their life, but I know, I guess I was a early teenager, and I wanted to be a comic book artist. That's what I was really good at drawing, and had really perfected, or pretty much perfected, drawing superheroes. And so I just thought, one of these days, that's what I wind up doing. And I can't really remember what year it was, but my dad was kind of a big wrestling fan. We lived up in, we had moved from Memphis, Tennessee to Ohio, a little town outside of Cleveland, and that's why I've always been a Cleveland sports fan. We lived in this little town called Amherst, Ohio, but that was the first time that I actually remember seeing wrestling on television. And my dad would watch it, and I started watching that. And then I sort of related those guys, the wrestlers, to like superheroes. I mean, they were on TV and they were fighting, and the good guys against bad guys, and it was almost an extension of what I'd seen all the time in the comic books. And then when I was about, I don't know, 14 or 15 years old, we moved back down to Memphis, and Memphis had this TV show that was on every Saturday morning, live studio wrestling, a 90-minute show, right from a TV station there right from a studio there in Memphis, and it was crazy. Everybody in the city, everybody in town watched that show. It was unbelievable. The ratings were through the roof, and it was just, of course, you got to realize back then that was at a time when there were only 3 stations to watch. It was before cable TV. Mm-hmm. So, the only thing that was on the other channels, I think, at the time were cartoons. So it was everybody in town watched the wrestling show. Then also in Memphis, they had a live wrestling event every Monday night, a weekly show. And my dad and I started going to those shows. And I don't know, somewhere I would take a sketch pad with me or something sometimes to the show, and either show some of my friends that were sitting around us some of my artwork, or even maybe sketch the shows. Somebody suggested, they said, man, because I'd drawn some pictures of the wrestlers, and somebody said, you should send those into the TV station. And I really hadn't even thought about it, but then I thought, well, yeah, I'll do that and see what happens, So I gathered up 6 or 7 drawings of the different wrestlers, and nobody would know the names of them now, from that era. But it was like guys like Jackie Fargo he was like the big main, he was the AJ Styles, right, of the time then. Jackie Fargo, and the mean villain was this little Japanese guy named Tojo Yamamoto. And so anyway, I drew some pictures of those guys, sent them to the TV station. I just put wrestling show 485 South Highland and put them in an envelope and sent them off. And so then the following morning, I turned on the TV, or the next Saturday morning, I turned on the TV, and the show always came on with their 2 announcers, the commentators. It was Lance Russell and Dave Brown, and they had their announce table that they sat at. And when the show came on the air, they started talking to each other, and I looked on the TV, and I could see my drawings were sitting on the announce table right there, and I said, oh my gosh, he's got my drawings. I guess they're going to show them on the show. And sure enough, about halfway through the program, the announcer, Lance Russell, said, hey, Dave, you know what? We got some drawings sent in by a young man named Jerry Lawler, and we'd like to show them to everybody here. There's really good artwork. And so, he holds up my drawings and shows them on there. And I was just like a kid in a candy store. This was the greatest thing that ever happened. And my artwork being seen on television. And then when the show was over, my phone rings, and it was Lance Russell, and he called me up and said, man, everybody really liked your artwork. And he's especially one guy, he said, Jackie Fargo. And I'm like, Jackie Fargo, he's like the biggest star in wrestling, to me. And he said, Jackie would like to meet you, and he would like you to do some artwork for him. So it was crazy, the next few weeks I started doing art and sending them into the station, and after about 3 weeks, he called me back again and had me come over to the TV station. They actually let me sit down at the announce table and showed me on TV, and that's where I met Jackie Fargo, who not only was a big wrestler, but he owned a nightclub in Memphis, and he wanted me to come over and paint. The club was about the size of this room, and he had me paint about 100 different little cartoon caricatures of him wrestling all over the walls of his whole club, But I was tickled to death to do that and started. So that's how I met Jackie Fargo, and became friends with him after a little while, because I was hanging around there so much. And then after a little bit, I think he sort of looked at me as what we call in the business a stooge, somebody that he could send off, and do errands for him, a gopher basically. But anyway, I got to ride on some trips with him to certain little towns close around, and that's when I started badgering him. I saw this wrestling deal, and I just thought, man, this is the greatest thing ever. By this time now, I was like 19, a little over 19, almost 20 years old, and I sort of started badgering Jackie Fargo, and I said, Jackie, please, could I just try this one time? Could I just go on TV, let them somebody beat me up or something? Could I just get in the ring one time? And I'll never forget, he says, kid, forget it. You're too good an artist. You just need to stick with art. You don't want to mess with the business. And I kept badgering him. Finally, I said, if you just let me try it one time, Jackie, one time, I swear I'll go back to doing art and I won't ever ask you again. So somehow he agreed to let me do it, and that was 47 years ago, and I've been doing the wrestling ever since. But Michael, I get in this long story, Michael's Headlocked comic book has let me kind of come full circle with doing the art, and especially being even though it is just the covers, it's like being a comic book artist in my mind, which is what I had, as a kid always wanted to do. So I appreciate Michael for letting me have the opportunity to do this stuff, and it's been a lot of fun.
How much
Actually happened, but of course everybody knew that I was a big Batman fan. During the actual, I guess it's like 1966 is when Batman was really big on television. I remember at my house we still had a black and white TV, so I couldn't watch it in color. So I feigned interest in this girl that was a classmate of mine because she had a color TV. So I would
anything to watch the bat. Huh?
Yeah, I would go over and put my arm around her during Batman just to watch the show on color. But anyway, I can't remember exactly what year it was. Had to be in the mid '70s. And what it was a World of Wheels car show was coming to Memphis, and they had the Batmobile, and they had Adam West there as a guest. You've probably seen these car shows that go around the country and everything. Well, it was a big deal, and so when I saw that he was going to be there, I can't remember if he or Jerry Jarrett, but anyway, my partner, one of us contacted the promoters of the car show and told them, hey, we've got this top-rated TV show in Memphis, and if you would like to have Adam West come on our Saturday morning show and plug the fact that the car show was actually that day later on that evening that he was going to be appearing at the car show. And so they called back and said yeah. And so I was just like, once again, kid in the candy store. I'm going to actually meet my childhood hero there in Adam West. So I got to go down, and they told us to give us the arrangements. I actually got to drive down. He was staying at a hotel downtown. I went down, picked him up at about 9:30. He came down, and the funny thing about this part of the story is, if you look when you look this thing up on YouTube, when it originally got put on there, somebody put Jerry Lawler confronts an obviously inebriated Adam West. But he was so cool. It was early in the morning, but he was definitely not inebriated at all. I picked him up at like 9:30 at his hotel downtown. We drove out to East Memphis. Actually stopped, I think, at a Perkins and got some breakfast, and then we got to the TV station at about 10:15. And he asked me on the way out there. He was just, he was as nice and cool as he could be. It was like all of a sudden I'm sitting in the car with the guy. It felt like I'd known him all my life. Driving out there. And he said, man, I don't have to put on the whole outfit, do I? And I said, you're Batman. You do whatever you want. You're doing us a favor by being on the show. Be on there any way you want. So he said, well, if you don't mind, I'll just put on the cowl and the cape and maybe my gloves and just wear this jogging suit. So what we wound up doing with him was when the show came on the air, and I, of course, knowing that he was going to be there, I'd already had this Super King wrestling outfit made somewhere in the past, so I brought that to the TV station that morning. And so we put Adam West out in the audience and just sitting with the fans We only had about 3 or 4 rows of ringside seats, put them out in the audience, sitting with the fans, and then our commentator, Dave Brown, actually looked over and the camera caught him in the audience, and here's here's Adam West sitting with all these fans, and he's got on his mask and his gloves, and he's sitting in a jogging suit, and he's just sitting there, and then Dave Brown goes, "Sir, can I get you to come over here for a second?" Me? Okay. So he gets up and goes over, and his sense of humor was just so. This was probably 10 years after he had finished doing the Batman show, but it was still that same character that he did on the Batman show. He said, "I'm in Memphis because there's maybe a hookup between the evil king of Memphis and Mr. Freeze and this radical change in the weather and everything." And he said, it's just something off the top of his head that he came up with, and I think that's probably why people might have thought he was drunk or something. But anyway, then I came out, confronted him, and we had our little, just a little set to there with talking back and forth, and then finally we. Said, well, we'll finish this discussion down at the car show later on tonight. So that was the way he plugged the car show. But it went on to become like in folklore in Memphis television history that Batman showed up on a wrestling show and confronted the evil super king on it. But you got to go back and watch it. It's
worth watching.
Oh, I gotta go look this up.
Jerry, was he appearing as Batman or as Adam West?
No, it's Batman.
Okay, because I was like, why does he have the costume with him?
He was there.
So he's the
Always bring your gear.
He made appearances as